thought I would come
Hey,
out.
everyone. Happy harvesting. So my name is Holly Bird. I'm the co-executive director of Title Track, and I'm so honored to be a guest here today at Harvest Gathering. And I want to introduce a dear friend of mine and one of our newest board members to Title Track, a longtime supporter and contributor to Harvest Gathering, and well known in her own right for her music, for her activism, for her literary works, and just being like an amazing person. So I'd love to introduce Rachel Marco Havens, our leader for this wonderful conversation tonight.
I thought I would start with just some breath, some water, some wind, some sun. Just kind of root here. I'm gloriously positioned. There goes the cars. In what is now known as the Catskills. This is Lenape land. These mountains here are cradling what is New York City's water. And so New York City drinks this water and has been drinking this water for over 100 years now. Actually, last year it was marked 100 years, a couple of years ago, maybe marked 100 years since this neighborhood was that was a little town that's now serving water to New York. And I thought I would share that with you because I'm thinking a lot these days about reciprocal exchange, stewardship of land, stewardships of each other's hearts, each other's work, and we're in a time right now where it's just so important that we really consider how much space we're taking up. I mean, we've already been in that conversation for some time now, but like even more and more and more, this is coming up for me and for many of us. And so I could share a little bit about myself. It's interesting because normally when we have a harvest gathering, we're all together. And the weather's quite a lot like it is right now where I am. There usually it's chilly, but the sun is out and it's a beautiful day, and then as soon as it goes down, it's cold. And we all layer up, excuse me, and it's just a beautiful gathering and opportunity to come together with people who are looking to expand heart space, energy, for wider communities, expand perspective, which is a really important thing right now. And so for me, I'm thinking a lot about that expansion of perspective. I live in a town called Woodstock, New York. It's a little town, like a few thousand people. But the surrounding area in those mountains where I just showed you on the other side of the Shokan Reservoir, the community is wider. The space is wider than the little tiny hamlet of Woodstock. But as I'm returning here after a year in Michigan, not really, I guess it wasn't a whole year, but I've been back and forth trying to pretend that I live in Michigan. I ended up back here for COVID. And a lot of things have really opened up for me since then. I'm thinking about a lot of things, thinking about allyship, thinking about accomplices, thinking about it's been 6 years, Holly, since 5 years since Standing Rock? 4? How many years? When Standing Rock
since 2016.
And it's now 2020, so 4 years feels like a eon. But I remember when that conversation really kind of bled out into all of these movements that were touching, excuse my horn, that were touching on the idea of indigenous sovereignty, um, environmental justice, social justice. We're all kind of meeting at this point where we realize that the point of extraction, all the way to the point of combustion, it's indigenous people, it's people of color, the people of the global majority. In other words, the non white people who have tried to convince us that we are minorities for all these years. And a lot of people don't even realize that they're trying to convince us of that. This conversation around allies and the need for allies really started to resonate in the circle that I was in. And I'm sure this is not, that wasn't the first time people were hearing these calls for allies and allyship. And even then it was like, allies is not the right word. We understand we need some allies, people who will support, but can't necessarily stay all the way, maybe have their own agenda. We need accomplices. And this conversation came out around accomplices, allies and accomplices. Well, the ally will be in there for a little bit. You definitely can know they'll show up with some, little support, but we can't know they'll stay the whole way. The accomplice will ride all the way. And as I'm starting to hear these allies and accomplices conversations reemerge around Black Lives Mattering, around the people of the global majority, otherwise known as Black, Indigenous people of color, these allies and accomplices conversations are returning. But now we see everybody on this level playing field of COVID just hit. It's leveling. It's not level, but it's more leveling because more people are afraid for their health and their safety, and their money can't buy them more than a quick test and isolation. But in general, we're looking at a time where everything has to be rebooted. We understand that you cannot retrofit the two of us, Holly and myself, people of color. We both live with some skin privilege, right? People of darker skin tones, people of more marginalized communities. You cannot retrofit us into those systems because they were designed to extract and erase us. So what do we do now? Well, this has set me on this journey to understand Western language. And that's part of why this is really difficult. And I'm just setting us up here so that we can actually talk, Holly, because I started looking and hearing and having these conversations with people who I thought were my ride or die, people who are like family, quote unquote. And as soon as there's as this sort of end of the world Mad Max conversation starts coming up, people close up, people suck in. And so this idea then comes around where we need people who will ride or die, all the way to the end, the accomplice. And then I'm going, but wait, I don't need an ally, because as I look out into Western society, I see people watch shows like Survivor. They watch Big Brother, where, as explained to me, normal people are there for 6 months. Celebrities, they're there for 6 weeks because, they got to get back to their really important work. And then they end up in these houses where they have to live together, and there's going to be a last man standing, and he wins $1 million or something for a charity for them poor or whatever they're going to send some money to with it, And so, but then they put these people in these houses and they start to create these alliances. I'm going to be your last one standing. We're going to do this. It's going to be me and you, man. And so we're going to screw over that guy and that guy and that guy. But then together, we're going to make them think that we're actually their friend, but we're not. So we have the first final 3, but then it gets down to the final 2. But actually, I was actually doing that over there with 3 other duos, because I'm just trying to keep myself from going down. So that's what an ally starts to look like to me when I start to see, as I try to understand the language that is being translated from the other side of that conversation. When I say I need allies to the front, what does that mean to the white people, the non-melanated people, the melanatedly challenged, right? What happens to those people when you say, I need my allies? What is the first thought in their mind when they think of allyship? And then I move to accomplice. If you are going to be my accomplice, then that means my existence is a crime. If you are going to be an accomplice in fighting for racial and social justice, that means that you are um, aiding and abetting the crime of my life. And that is not either proper language. And so when I think about that, I think about what that all draws up for people. And so all of this is shifting me into this now search to understand what it is that actually means the ride or die. People go, well, let's talk about family. Let's talk about this. Family's ready to cut each other down for a buck. They'll go fight over where the will is and who's getting the best thing out of the booty. People will, that doesn't work. So, so I'm on this quest, and it's very difficult to be having this conversation, A, with myself because I'm talking too much, but I'm giving us a setup, and B, when we're in a circle, we can really popcorn and have this conversation, because I'd like to actually learn from Western culture, non-tribally raised. Like, I wasn't raised by an indigenous tribe, but I was certainly raised in a tribal way where we all took care of each other. There was no question. No one went hungry because no one would ever question anyone not eating or not having a place to sleep or not having didn't matter what it was. We took care of each other. We fed each other. We taught each other's kids. We put our children to bed, our families, friends, everybody. We were a tribe. So how do we find in this Western cultured, societally raised human condition the right language to express to Western cultured humans what we mean when we say that we need allies to the front or accomplices, when we ask for support, when we try to explain to people that there's a difference between supporting people and turning them into your charity. There's a difference between being there for the benefit of the wider community and performatively showing your activism out to the world. These are the kind of things in a celebrity culture, you start to wonder how many people are really there for you. I grew up as the child of a celebrity, and I do have to question, and I didn't. But as I grow older, I learned that I should have been questioning who was my friend because they were my friend and who was my friend because they thought they might get a ride somewhere. And I'm talking about not the people I particularly grew up with, but like I meet new people. I had a partner who thought he was hooking up with my father's daughter, and then he met me. So how does Western culture look at work, what support and connectivity means? How do we bring these answers to the people? How do we find them? How do we know how to ask? So that's what I'm thinking about. And I wish we were all together. I miss my harvest family.
And we miss you, although you're never far away. We've all connected over these harvest gatherings, and sometimes I feel like if you want to find a good definition of an accomplice, and I hate that word too, actually, I'm going to agree with you there. I mean, definitions in English don't mean the same as they do in Anishinaabe, or in Kere is my people's language. We have a lot of different concepts, and so much of the English language is rooted in individualism and feudalism, right? Patriarchy and hierarchical terminology. So when we look at that and we say, in our different languages, in our respective languages, I love going back to my roots. I love going back to my indigenous roots. And I think you can find this in all cultures all over the world, not just, you know, here in my indigenous America. But that tribalism is the point. You know, we look at an ally as part of the whole,
right?
Not as part of an individualistic thing, not as a one-upper, not as a hero, not as the scapegoat. You know, it's part of the whole. We're all taking care of each other,
right?
And we're not separate from one another in that way. You know, one example I love to use, and this is just like a law point, right? One of the laws that I've gotten to deal with over my career as an attorney is with ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act. And that's come under a lot of attack recently. And one of the unique things about ICWA was that it was created for Native American families, Indigenous families, to deal with the child welfare system. And one of the big concepts under ICWA is that when you go to place children outside of the home, you have to give the tribe a voice in that process. And you also have to give first pick to the tribal family, essentially, or the kid's immediate family first, then extended family, then tribal community, and then everybody else. So the rub is that when you get cases like some of the ones that have been in the news, where a child is placed outside of the tribal community, and those parents start fighting to adopt this child, the larger community, the white society, tries to fight ICWA, saying it's not fair. It puts the interests of the tribe in front of the child. And that's a concept that doesn't have any real basis in Native American culture.
Right.
So, for example, I always say, you guys talk about bonding as being premier between these two, this child and this parent. You talk about the child's best interests outweigh anybody's, right? And I say, and you know, really, we're all looking out for the children. But what I try to explain to them is that you're not understanding how this law was created. The child is not separate from the tribe, and the tribe is not separate from the child. So when we talk about best interests, we're talking about both of them.
Right.
So that's an example of how we look at things differently, and where tribalism plays a part. That's why the best interest of the tribe is the same as
right.
the best interest of the child. Nobody can be, you know, away from each other. So that's the same thing to me with allies and accomplices, you know, people who are working to help oppressed people. You know, we could, and let's say we all believe we're working for a righteous reason. We're all working together to combat oppression, to, you know, stamp out racism and hatred. Those are all things that we believe are righteous and good as humans. But how do we get to that point where we feel that we can trust our allies, our non-BIPOC people, to be there for us, right? And vice versa. How do they become our ride or dies in this struggle? And I know that's what I think we're talking about. And so our concepts are different. So in my way, in my mind, that ride or die person is not separate from the whole movement. We all take care of each other. And if we're all taking care of this and helping our brothers and sisters in Black Lives Matter or in Standing Rock, then we're helping all of us. Because for society to continue on in that kind of tyranny and that kind of racism and hatred is horrible for all of us.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Well, see, it makes sense. And of course, it makes sense to you. It makes sense to me. It does not make sense to Western cultured humans, right? And so that is the part where there's levels of that, where it can be seen. But when you get down to the nitty gritty, like that seems sensible to me. That one would think, like, to me, if I'm doing better, that, what was that? I think it was from the 15, the fight for 15. We all do better when we all do better, right? Like that's just like as elementary as you can get. But that is not how Western society raises people to think. And so now, as we get to this place where we're thinking about, you know, survival, right, in a land that has been created for a survival for the fittest sort of mentality, it's that's the question. So recently, Holly, in a conversation that I had with in another group, the Sovereign Sisters group that Lila June and um, Angel, Cheryl Angel's group, they had a Sovereign Sisters circle weekend a couple of weeks ago. And I pitched this question to that circle, and we were actually in a conversation. Most of them non-melanated, really looking for a way to be a good ally. That was kind of why they came to the circle. And by the way, if anyone is tuning in, it's so weird to not see you all. You're welcome to join us. And if you're watching us on YouTube, my name is Rachel Marco Havens. I'm with Holly T. Bird, and we are here sharing with you, sort of beginning the conversation, I hope, within this community around allies and accomplices. And as we are having it with ourselves, we welcome you to join us. You can send in some questions via the chat there if you're watching on YouTube, or you can also join the Zoom, and Ben will give you the link to pop into this and actually talk with us, because we really would like to talk to you too, not just talk to each other and the screen. But so I started to really dig in the Sovereign Sisters Circle with a really cool group of people. And I think one of the closest things that I came to begin to help Western race humans to understand what we mean, we had to move into American team sports. Right? Because when you say the whole family does better, or the community does better when the people who are serving the elites are actually making some money, you can talk to that story, but people don't, it doesn't cross their mind because they're still in this mentality. But when you bring them on the baseball field, or even better, the football or soccer field, you start to see them understand a little bit more what we mean when we say we need everybody, all hands on deck, allies to the front. Allies, we need accomplices. No, we don't. We need a running back. We need the quarterback. We need the guys. We need the linebacker, right? We need people who are going to stay on the team all the way through. Because if you say we need family, no. Family members have the worst and creepiest energetic interpersonal dynamics ever. So that's not a good example of what we're asking for. So it made me start to want to learn a little bit more about football, but I've been super busy. But I feel like if I can learn a little more about football and like about the plays and how they're made, that maybe there could be a way to sort of like reframe our asks to help people understand what we mean.
I think that's a great concept. I mean, one of the best American biggest American pastimes, and it's a team sport. And I think what we're really talking about is just, it's almost that good old fashioned loyalty.
Yeah.
How do you inspire loyalty to a one-touch generation?
Right. It's not just,
how do you, everybody wants everything now.
But I'm going to back out of the bit and say that, like, because my son's 21 now and it's 22, and so he fits into that, like, people want to pass off that younger generation. And I'm not saying that you're doing that, right? But we're in this one touch group. But there's actually like, wild because young people that I work with out in the field, young people that I see, how I see my son relating, like there's a loyalty and a level of inclusion and support for each other that a lot of people that are my age, I'm 50, in that range, don't understand. I'm going to give you an example. I had some friends who went to a rainbow gathering years ago, and they had to carry all this water, and they were trying. There was like a couple of mothers, and they were, the rainbow gatherings like this, like all these hippies and people come together, and they get out on the land, and they live on the land for a few. It's like sort of the precursor to the what's now Burning Man, right? Took that in the whole Mad Max direction, but they met this guy. They were out in I think of the Allegheny National Forest, and they met this guy who like came out of nowhere, and he carried all of the water. He was so excited. He lived just down the hill, and he was walking in the woods, and he happened upon a rainbow gathering. And he was so blown away that he would find such this really cool thing. And he was he was like a veteran, young veteran. And he was like, wow, this is the first time since I've gotten out of the service that I've actually come across people who get it, because they don't have a choice, right? We're in combat.
Right.
Your life is on the line. And so the conversation around like loyalty, solidarity, stick-to-itiveness, fortitude, consistency, the sharpness of a marksman, all of those things, the accountability, that was all very, very present for him because he had been on the front line. Those of us who grew up on the front line, whose life is a front line, we don't question those things about like, oh, you need something? I got it. I'm here. I bask in your joy when you flourish because I know that someone who I love is going to smile a little extra today instead of being jealous that you got something before me. Though all of these mentalities, they're foreign to me in the natural sense. So how I don't even need to I don't have time right now to fully cultivate this paradigm shift. But if we could find the right language, maybe we can help them understand what we mean when we say we need you to stick all the way through.
You know, it's interesting. A friend of mine traveled to LA to hang out with some of the activists there, and they were at that time protesting some water issues, indigenous water issues, and then MMIW, the missing murdered indigenous women. And one of the things that they discovered, and these were friends of mine from South Dakota and who were, Standing Rock leaders. They found out that when they got there, the way that the LA crew does it is when push comes to shove, they put themselves in front of BIPOC. They would put themselves physically between the police and people of color. And the reason they did that was because obviously we know there's a disproportionate amount of police brutality against people of color. And they're more likely to get arrested, and they're more likely to get hurt during that arrest because of that brutality. And so they also said, if anybody's going to get arrested, it's us. Recognizing the privilege that they had during an arrest situation and any court situation. Recognizing the imbalance between people of color and white people when it comes to the justice system and sentencing or pleas offered or whatever it is, even representation. And they were shocked and so happy to see that this was actually the practice there. That was like a stated normal practice for this group of activists that was quite large in LA. And to them, that was okay. Somebody gets it. Somebody finally gets it. This is what equity is about.
Right. And because de-escalate, right? When you, as a white person, stand up out, everything is de-escalated. There's an immediate.
Rachel, we're not catching you. Can't hear you right now.
De-escalation of violence as soon. What I'm more of, right?
Okay, so
that way. And there are.
So we didn't catch, I think, your last couple. Yeah, I was gonna say we didn't catch your last few sentences. Are you there?
Basically, can you hear me now?
I can hear you better. Yeah. Yes.
I would venture to guess that those are young people.
They were young people, but there were also some older ones. Yeah.
Of course.
There's a few, mostly younger, and a few radical older ones.
Right. To step aside to allow the younger people to lead.
Mm-hmm.
That's an issue. That is when you start to see more inclusion. You start to see more women making decisions. Start to see LGBTQ community at the forefront.
Yes.
It's a whole different conversation when the young people come in. And so that's another thing is sort of I'd like to have this with some young people. Are there any people, have we heard from Ben? Are there any people who have checking in? Do we know if anyone's watching on YouTube? Anyone have any thoughts, questions?
Chrissy, someone who's listening, Chrissy Reitmeyer mentioned loving that practice. I think that we were just discussing. And, probably, I don't know how many people have heard of that or who haven't. I know that's a concept that we're sort of introducing to people up here. Justice is doesn't roll out the same in all places. So we still have some places here where, there's some 1950s thinking, but we're teaching our allies here slowly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm looking for some new words. I want to talk to Teokas and Ghost Horse about this because he's such a language head.
Mm-hmm.
He really likes to, remind us how Western language skews. What's our time? 6:05. Oh, we have a few more minutes. So, so what are your choppy audio for sure? I just got a text from our beloved man at the helm who says the audio is choppy.
Yes.
So I'm going to move. And do you want to chat for a minute while I see if I get better service? I have all my bars, but it's giving me issue.
So yeah, I'm happy to kind of expound on, and I'd love to give some examples of good allies that I've seen. Those ride or dies, people that I look at and I go, I'm learning from you. And we're all in this together.
Yeah, so I'm gonna take a little.
Okay. So again, we're talking about, what makes a good ally, what makes a good accomplice. How are we using our language to talk about what it is that, as people of color, as LGBTQ, as people who are trying to overcome oppression, overcome racism, overcome genocide, what is it that we need to see from our friends and our supporters, the people that we work with in this all together. And Rachel had mentioned before that the concept of allyship and the concept of accomplice is really rooted in a Western dialect, is rooted in a Western definition. And I agree with her. There's not, to me, in the English language, there's not really a good word for it. And I know that the concept in my indigenous culture is, like I said, rooted in tribalism. So there is no separate line. I think we all remember, like when we were little, you saw the Indian movies where two people would make a blood pact by cutting their palms and putting them together, and thence they became blood relatives. And they would never leave each other's side, and they were always there for each other. And so, to me, the concept almost, of this movement work and working together is about making relatives. It's about becoming relatives. As we all are in this very large world, we are all related. We are all one. We've learned how to divide ourselves into factions and groups by skin color, religion, creed, whatever it is that separates us all. But to me, it's about making relatives. And how do you become a relative? How do you become a good relative? And when we say relatives, it's not even necessarily the same thing as your family. You have a family that you're born to, and that you live with for most of your life, and if you're fortunate, you have a really good one, and if you're less fortunate, you may not. So there is a concept for me, and this is true in many indigenous cultures. For example, in the Lakota culture, when you make a relative, you're going to put them into there's a hunka ceremony where someone becomes a sponsor to that person. And then you go through a ceremony, and that person becomes your relative, and you're responsible for them, and they're responsible for you. And then their relatives are also responsible for you, and vice versa. So to me, when we're doing this movement work, that's what we're doing. We're making relatives. I always said to people, one of the biggest lessons of Standing Rock for me when we were there was that we were making a clan. We were making the Water Clan, which was a new clan called by Mother Earth. And so everybody who heard and answered that call, that movement call, became part of that Water Clan. And thus we're relatives. We're all relatives in this clan. And in that way, we're together. We are not separate. We are part of a whole. And so even to this day, I don't get along with all of my Water Clan relatives. And I'm certain that most of us don't. But would I do something for that person? Would I turn them away? If it's toxic and unhealthy, I might, because that's part of their journey, right? But I'm not going to turn away from them as a relative, if that makes sense. So to me, that's the word that I would use. Rather than ally or accomplice, I'm making a relative.
Right. Yeah. And again, and I feel that. And so what that does is that puts us to a good example of some of what we're looking for. Let's play with that a little bit. If anyone's watching, and if you want to send some things to us that help you express what it is that you're feeling and thinking when you take on the commitment to follow through on supporting a community member or a family member or a friend or a colleague or an a fellow activist, quote unquote, or artivist, or whatever that is, when you think out in the world and you think about being there for somebody, what does that do for you? How far would you go? Would you take the bullet? Would you, um, you know, withstand the interrogation? Would you be the one to get arrested? Would you automatically jump in front of one of your brown family members when you see a situation escalating? Would you put yourself on that line? Or do you have a different capacity level where maybe you would make sandwiches for jail support, but you can't do much more than that? There's nothing wrong with that. This is very okay, and this is why the definition between the allies and the accomplices conversation is a good one to have. It's not. There's nothing wrong with being an ally if that's all you can be, but I need to know what that means to you. Because when I step into a conversation, when I take on a large amount of emotional labor towards a situation, uh, when I step into a collaborative partnership, I want to know how far you really are willing to go and what your agenda is, what you came for, why you came for it, and how far you're willing to go on whatever that is. But when we're really talking about activation and stepping out onto the streets, where it's now a felony in where across the country or many places to be arrested in certain places on the grounds of federal property, like we're getting to a situation now where those people who are standing up are doing so at the risk of their life and their voice, right? I mean, I met a man, his name's Abram Loeb. He's a very devout fractivist. He might be running for president right now. Anyway, he was a wild Occupy movement member, and after fracking was banned, see those air quotes, banned in New York. And he was fascinating because the first famous people getting credit for that ban, but some of us tied down, we locked down, we have records, we are broke, we gave everything we had, we volunteered our lives, we didn't come from a place of luxury and privilege, we gritted we were graded on the cheese grater to get to here, and we're not on the stage, we're not pretty up, we're not a famous celebrity singer, but we were there for every die-in possibly make. So those places, hey, be a great ally. Give some money to Title Track. Give some money to organizations, smaller organizations that are underfunded, that aren't being supported, that don't have $80,000-$100,000 a year fees, right? How do you get to a place where you can support a small organization, people, without having to throw your name on it, to have a banner on a plane drive over the site? How do we make choices that support the wider whole community? So when I say that I need allies to the front or accomplices to the front, in the closest thing of Western young language, we need ride or dies. That's it. You're gonna go all the way. We got 10 minutes. We need ride or dies. I want to frame it back in that team thing. We need people who are going to go all the way. They may need some time on the bench, but they're in the team. What do we need? We need people willing to trust us to make decisions about how we need to, or would like to, or would better be served by whatever it is you're sharing. We want the freedom to design our own experiences and our own spaces, without patriarchal Western settler colonialist, frameworks. We need people who see the value in, as Holly shared, becoming relatives, noticing the difference between a family member, like someone you grew up with and were wrangled up and like a rat in a cage with for half your life, but to a relative, to someone, to a word. When I think of relative, personally, I spent a lot of time in the Buddhist world, so a lot of this indigenous communities still they focus on the same issues and the same word, and some of the same Western translations of those words come up. Um, we are all related is instantly displays to me the interconnectedness of all things. It instantly reminds me that the tears that I cried this afternoon be rain soon.
Mm-hmm.
That the same water has been flowing through this atmosphere for millions of years. It's the same water, it's just moving to different places. We are the same. We are connected to the earth, the ground, to this metal box I'm sitting in right now. We are all connected. Now, how do we help bring that? Because that's the fact that particular concept isn't part of the Western domestication and the raising of those. That's the barrier. That's the place I want to go. I want to go to the place that Western raised people go, oh yeah, oh I get it. Where is that?
But here's an example, because we do have examples of it, and not to bring up this example as in this is the way we want to do things, but if you look at the military, you look at Marines, they go through training together, they experience hardship, especially if they've gone to war together. They are ride or die for the rest of their lives.
That's what I'm saying.
There's that
team sports,
that indoctrination military. Though they have an indoctrination factor. Yeah, but how do we, I mean, obviously we don't want to be military, but
no, but
there is that ride or die, so it is possible.
Right, and like I was saying about the man who was at the Rainbow Gathering, he was so blown away to meet people who behaved like his crew, that were like, they were there for each other. Everybody was together. There was like an all for one and one for all. Like all of those kind of concepts, they do exist in Western culture. Where they exist, let's find them to find the language that works. Now, in the military, it's not an all for one and one for all. It's all of our team for our team and one for us. And so what we need to know is that we got you in our squad. Are you in the squadron? Are you out of the squadron? Does that language work for you? But then you're used to having a sergeant, and we need people to have like more level playing field on the grounds of how we relate and make decisions. You know what I mean? So like, again, this is the fine tuning and the crafting of that next paradigm shift away from the allies and the accomplices and into the new language. And that's what I really want. And as I called this quote unquote workshop, which is really a circle, but we're having this. I love that you're here with me. I'm so excited. I'd be freaking out if it was just me. I'd be like, but I want our people out on this mission to bring us examples of what does real true loyalty mean? How far are you willing to go for the cause, whatever cause that is? When is that point when you know you're going to need to step back, so that when you enter the conversation, we know that that's how far you can go.
Right.
It's okay to not be able to go all the way in certain situations. But the most important part is that we're all very clear about what that means and what our capacity level is, so that A, we're not asking our people more of what from them out of their capacity, and B, so that we know when we get to that front line that we're not going to be left there holding the bag. And
exactly. I agree with that. Having been in those situations, having been in that frontline area where people were getting hurt, for example, when I went to Standing Rock, I went as a member of the legal team. And so one of the rules for the legal team is that you were not allowed to be at the action, because we needed to hang back for when people needed us to come and help them. So you couldn't be on the front line. It's sort of the same thing with the medics. The medics stayed on the outside or in the back and only came up front to get somebody and pull them out to help them. And so the other aspect of that for me when I went was I also knew that if I was on the front line, there's no way I could hang back.
Right.
If I saw an elder or a brother or sister getting hurt, it would probably take 5 cops to get me down, before I took out 10 of them first.
But here's the
right. And that wouldn't have been good, because I wouldn't have been able to help them later. But I wouldn't have been effective as a leader of the legal tent.
Something I want to circle us back to on that is, which brings us to the performative activism thing, where some people can't get the concept that they're still just as much of an ally or an accomplice or a family member when they're holding space, meditating on the hill in the back. The point is not how much blood are you dead, right? But it's how much are you willing to work together with people to step back, to take up less space? What do we need from our allies? We need our allies or our accomplices or our ride or dies. We need our people on our team to be proactive about making the kind of choices and decisions that are coming up in the we need to be able to defer to each other, to the people who are the most sensible in the moment, not the guy who's the boss, right? We need people who are willing to stay with us all the way till we need people to allow us to design, as I said earlier, in our own way. I really think, and Caitlin was the one who made that who made the comment earlier. Was that?
Yeah, let me bring that up. She mentioned she loved the reframe of the family and ride to die, and found that it was interesting. She said, I was conflating relatives and family. There is something about relative to me that seems biological, whereas my family includes both bio and chosen people.
Yeah.
And I said, exactly, how do we define our relatives? How do we define our family? Now, for me, I kind of transposed that. For me, family is my blood family. And relatives go beyond that. But of course, for me, that's an indigenous concept, right? So our relatives are everybody around us, whereas our family is like this little tiny group over here. And I guess when we say relatives, we say, our clan relatives are some people say Tioshpaye or whatever it is. So there's different definitions there, and you can name it how you want. If you want to say that larger circle is your family, that's fine. We know rainbow families called it that for years, but it's the same concept.
I have in love, and then I have my family, and then I will be like my relatives. Like there's certain members of my people who are not so I see where she's going with that in the Western conversation. The relatives are more the extended outer family, right?
Yes.
And family is like, yo, that's your fam. And to be honest, you're more my family than some of my own relatives, right? And so you see how that language flips, right?
Yeah.
And so again, here I am saying I need some blah 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 blah, and people don't get what we're asking. You see how she just called it, because she's right. My family that's my fam.
Right.
My relatives, those are those people that I'm related to or by marriage. And so, but when I, Om Takwiyas, like in my mind, when I think of that, right, I think of every relative of all the things that are interconnected. So language, we're dancing around and we're all living our language. It just means different things to different people. So when someone says, I got you, that's my dog, that's my family right there. Okay, well, let's talk about your relationship with your mom. How do you treat her? Let's talk about your cousin. When's the last time you connected with your cousins and your brothers? How's your family doing financially? How are you doing? Do your family take care of each other? Would any one of you ever be homeless in your family? Would they let that happen? If you were doing a massive amount of drugs, would they stop you? Would they step up? So when you say I'm your family, that's great, but like, what does that really mean to you? Right? So again, like,
and that's exactly true. Yeah. There's still, it still even goes beyond that, because like in our indigenous way, we consider our family to be even people that, for example, we call all older people our grandparents.
right.
You know, they're all elders, and we address all of them as grandma and grandpa. We address older relatives as auntie and uncle.
Mm-hmm.
And truly, they step in as auntie and uncle when they need to, or when we need them to. You know, children of the clan or children of the larger tribal family are children of everybody. And even though they live with their parents, it's not unusual for them to live with somebody else.
Right.
Right. So it's not, so our concept even there is different, but at the same time, that recognizes that, being relatives, being family is sometimes different than just blood.
Yeah.
Or name or lineal descent. It's a heart to heart thing more than anything.
Right. And so
so I think that's the clue. Where do we open hearts? How do we open hearts to that?
Right. And how do we build a trust? And
how do we empower?
How do we find the trust? Like, there's some people in my life that I know I can trust with hard information, hard stories, support when things are crazy, real clear reminders when I'm off base, but more and more I'm learning that how few people in the Western culture, and I'm not even talking about non-melanated people, but like severely Western cultured people, I don't speak that language, so I'm very interested in learning it. And another real thing that I wanted that came up a little earlier when we were talking about this sort of the allies and accomplice conversation, grassroots, right? Grassroots activism, from where I sit, says everybody speak with one voice, and we're going to go together and we're going to tackle that issue together as a force of nature, people, humans. But the more I think about it and the more time I spent in the grassroots dynamics, I realized that the idea of individual value was spoken about, but it wasn't really honored. And then the idea that everyone would come with something different, that if you couldn't be on the front line, you could make food for those who are. If you couldn't do that, you could make the signs or the art. You could do the things, and we're all going to carry this. But it wasn't happening in that same way. And so, grassroots can be very lifted real quick by the root and tossed in another spot to reactionarily grow. But when we actually begin to steward the forest and work like a well stewarded well-supported forest. We can give shade and compost to each other. We can take a break on the rock under the thing while the tree shades us. We can all bring our very different qualities to the mix and share what we have in a way that really accentuates, lifts up, and augments the work of the others around us. I want to be with people who jump up and down and rejoice in each other's success. I want to be in on teams that are working to who have no need to really bask in the shade of the tree they planted over there. It's okay if someone else sits
Mm-hmm.
under it, and it's not only okay. Beautiful dream of having been able to plant that and walk away and leave it for someone else to flourish on. We will have to separate ourselves from this systemic separation, the individuality industrial complex. The
That's
massive
right.
amount of money, energy that is bringing us into just we're working to separate us all from everything, ourselves, each other, the planet. So so I'm inviting anyone who watches this, anyone who wants to continue this conversation. I'd actually like to I think this will be an ongoing, maybe monthly chat until next harvest, and when we perhaps make a piece of art that like redefines it all, and we can like let people know what we've come to. But I invite anyone who's watching this to think about these ideas and concepts and think if you can think of places in the Western culture that really define what it is we need when we ask for our allies to the front and for accomplices to fill up the gaps when the allies can't follow through um, with incapacity. And I just also want to thank you, Holly, for everything you're doing across Turtle Island, in Michigan with Title Track, being here with me today. I'm so glad we had this conversation. Really excited to continue working with you
And we have
and
so
really
much more.
hope that
You too. We have so much
so
more to
much more
talk
to do.
about
And
too.
also, yeah, I mean, let's do this. I think there's a lot. I think I've pulled back from a lot of my volunteer work, my decolonizing of other people's work and stuff, and I think it's time to start expanding on my own and also lifting the voices of those who are blow my mind, and I can't wait to find ways to do that. Um, every time
Yeah.
I have a new opportunity to do that, so I'm really excited to be joining the Title Track board, and um, I'm bringing Harvest,
Me
Earthwork,
too.
Title Track East with me, and I'll be back there soon for hugs.
I can't wait. So excited to see you again. Thank
So
you so
excited,
much.
and
Stay safe.
you're so welcome. Thank you. Um, I we
Mwah.
have a um yeah. Do you have no more questions in the till?
No, I think we're good.
Yeah. So then we're good. Let's wrap it up and let the evening go on. Mm,
All right.
okay.
Sounds good. Thank you so much,
So
Rachel, for being here today. Thank you for coming out here in the middle of everything that you're doing out east, and both with surviving and doing the work that you do. I'm so thankful for you for being here, and I missed you, and much big love to you.
big love and big hugs, and I can't wait to give you big hugs and more love. And one last quick thing. Somehow, here in Woodstock, the other volunteer got rid of all of my extraneous volunteer work. I have joined the review and redesign the police department commission here in Woodstock. So we are about to we're going forward in Governor Cuomo's mandated resolutions across every town in New York State to diversify the conversation. Very exciting.
really interesting. I hope to be sharing some of that experience with the community as I move forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and I'm working on that here as well in Grand Traverse County. We're meeting weekly with our sheriff and our prosecutor and our court administrator. And we're doing the same thing. So yeah, let's keep talking. And I'll be tonight. I'll also be moderating the 10:30 panel after the movie, Invisible Hands. And I hope I just got that right. And Rachel, will you be doing another workshop here this weekend?
I don't think I'm doing another workshop this weekend. I might be performing some music.
I believe, let me just check it out. I want to make sure we give you a shout out on that.
It's The Invisible Hand. That's the film tonight. Oh, I'm so excited.
That's the film
I'm going to get into range so that
it's about natural rights. I'm really excited to watch it and to help moderate that. And then Ben, when is our do we have a time that Rachel is going to be performing?
Well, who knows? If it happens, it happens. I'm brewing up some stuff just in case. I know that we're extending harvest this year, and it's awesome. Not all happening in 3 days. So let's see.
Well, all right.
See.
So okay. I will.
Thanks, everyone. Super excited to have
for now,
all
we're sending off. So miigwech and bamapi from the Great Lakes. Mwah.